Jake Ward is the Rip Current. We are talking here about the big invisible forces that grab onto us every day. And those forces are all gathered right now in Switzerland, Davos, Switzerland, where the World Economic Forum holds its annual gathering of the elite. You're going to hear a lot of headlines there, a lot of geopolitical tensions. The word Greenland is everywhere. But I want to talk today about a different issue that I'm seeing in Davos, and that is something having to do with a kind of FOMO that I think is playing right into big tech's hands in a way that is being made clear even just on the streets of Davos this very moment. So as you know, Davos is an annual gathering held in this tiny town in Switzerland that clogs the place with the ultra wealthy, all of whom require some sort of very high level, white glove kind of treatment, all of whom consider themselves to probably be the most important person in the room. And as a result, they come with all kinds of logistical complications that are the nightmare of anybody trying to get there. So Davos right now, of course, is in its, decades now. This has been going on. I think it's in the 56th year. It is a gathering always of the elite, but in this case, as the Associated Press is pointing out, inequality and unease are rising as elite Davos event opens with pro-business Trump set to attend. At a time when people are truly suffering around the world, when the numbers are bad for poor people in this world, this is a gathering of very transactional, very elite kinds of folks. And one of the things that happens when you go to an event like this is it's a little bit like going to your high school reunion. It doesn't really matter how cool you are or how cool you feel. When you go off to your high school reunion, you are relegated to who you used to be. And you wind up very quickly, I'm sure you've had this experience, feeling like, geez, am I cool enough to be here? Like, what's going on? You are put in your place so quickly just by your own imagination and your deep fear of missing out on something fun that's going on there that the cool kids are invited to and you might not be. And that is a function, of course, of the incredible amounts of just insecurity that drive people to the very heights of power. Anyway, I would argue, and also manifests itself in a place like Davos with, imagine a high school reunion with everybody jockeying for position, and they've all got like security details and limousines and private jets flying them in and out. I've attended a lot of sort of elite events. I went once to cover kind of a event at the Aspen Ideas Festival, big gathering in Colorado every year. Been doing a few times in which people from all over the world come together to talk about geopolitical issues, talk about all kinds of political questions. And in this particular case, I remember I was getting driven from one place to another in a golf cart by this nice intern, some very incredibly smart valedictorian style kid who's undoubtedly, they're not getting paid. He's driving me from place to place. And I said to him, so what's been most interesting to you about being here? He said, what's been most interesting is the security details. And I was like, oh, really? Tell me about it. And he's like, well, you've got Pervez Musharraf, at the time head of Pakistan. He was there with his Pakistani forces, that security detail. There were various members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They had their American security detail. I don't know if it was Netanyahu or who it was that was on there, but somebody from the very top of Israel was there. And so there's people there from, Israeli security forces, IDF forces. And then what was the other one? There were others that was like somebody from China. So they're there. Anyway, so we were talking and I was like, well, who do you think would win? Like, you've been around these guys this all week. Like you've seen what they've got. What do you think? And he's like, the easy bet would be the Americans, because they're here with all kinds of vans. And so clearly they've got like a huge amount of firepower in those vans, and they can call in whatever they need. So like if they really got into trouble, they could clearly, call in an incredible amount of backup. And I was like, good point. He's like, the Pakistanis, I don't think they would last long. He's like, they look tough, they look wiry, but they don't look like they have much with them. And there just isn't very many of them. I just don't think they would last very long. I think he was underestimating the Pakistani. Okay. He's like, but I think in the end, the Israelis would be the ones. And I was like, why is that? He's like, those guys look like you could shoot them and they would get right back up and keep firing. And I was like, oh, geez. So it's that kind of, that's the kind of conversation you're having in a place like the Aspen Ideas Festival, or in this case, the Aspen Institute, or Davos, or these various things. And one thing that happens when you're in these environments as a reporter is you begin to notice very quickly. And when I was a young person, I would get sucked into this. And now I watch it with a little more of an anthropological bent. But you get sucked into the idea. You look around at all of the parties being thrown. That is the big thing that goes on. And so, I've spent time at South by Southwest. I've spent time at Sundance. I've spent time at Consumer Electronics Show, like big international events. They inevitably have a party scene. And public relations people that you've had no interest in being in touch with until now suddenly are your ticket into a very fancy evening. And when I was in my 20s, right, and still drinking, I was trying to, get into those kinds of parties. And so I remember like following a much better ticketed guy from another publication around at South by Southwest one year and watching him get into each of these things. And he sort of brought me with as a plus one. And I just remember the deep feeling of dissatisfaction and the feeling that I somehow was not only just being left out, but also that I didn't, I wasn't, hit to what was going on, right? That I wasn't down with what was really important in that place, because those big parties were clearly what was most important. Well, there's a really great article in the New York Times today about this very dynamic, and it's headlined "AI, Big Tech, and Trump Shine Most Brightly at the Davos Spectacle." And its subhead is fantastic. The World Economic Forum is now dominated by global technology companies whose interests shunt aside most others. And it's written by this guy, Peter Goodman. He wrote this book about Davos. It's very interesting. I sort of been attending it for more than a decade. And he's there on the ground, walking around. And I know people who spend time in Davos. I've never been there. It's an incredibly expensive ticket. It's an incredibly expensive trip. Only a very few reporters ever really get sent there. But this guy is gone. And he describes this scene in which company after company is throwing these big AI themed parties, and that and huge lines of people are jostling to get into these gatherings. And he describes at one point here's what he says: a rented storefront outfitted as the gathering place for the Alliance for Global Good Gender Equity and Equality sat mostly empty. The initiative was launched by the Indian government 2 years ago to bolster women's health and education. Here at Davos, its place was mostly unnoticed. People passed by hurriedly en route to neon-tinted cocktails served up by a cryptocurrency firm for a pulsating lounge experience paid for by an AI company. And this is sort of the thing, right? This is the I would say the kind of the scene that winds up kind of creating a real sense. It really starts to sort of drive people's sense of reality in a place like Davos, that in a way that I think really shouldn't be underestimated. That when people go to a thing like that and the big parties are going on, those parties really define kind of the agenda for this place that in turn is identifying, is creating an agenda sort of for a lot of the world. And I just recently was speaking with one of the co-authors of India's guide, or sort of governmental kind of guidelines around AI. And his description of me of what that is like was very similar to what I've heard from a lot of other countries. I've spoken to people, who are thinking about how to regulate AI in their various countries. And so many of them have this feeling right now of not wanting to create new institutions, not wanting to create new agencies, not wanting to create new laws, but instead just trying to use their existing legal framework to impose on these on AI companies as much as possible. And meanwhile, try as fast and as hard as they can to get some of the money, to get in on the money that AI is making possible. Never mind that a lot of these economies are, I would think, going to be ruined in the short term by AI. A country like India, which I've discussed before, is very, very dependent. Its GDP is incredibly dependent on knowledge workers, English-speaking knowledge workers, to whom Western companies have been outsourcing creative and knowledge work and customer service for years. Suddenly all that work is going to go away if these AI companies and their pitches are to be believed. So at a place like Davos, the feeling here that people are that these global leaders and most importantly, their staffers who help them to make decisions are trying to get into big parties thrown by these big companies really has me feeling discouraged about the degree to which people are sort of taking this stuff seriously. So there's things like the AI and Exploration Salon, where folks from a couple of partner organizations are throwing a big thing with margaritas and house fishing and the rest of it. There was a big gathering thrown by Microsoft. There are these just big things going on that these companies are throwing, that people are getting sucked into, even as we're seeing all of this crazy geopolitical tension ratchet up and up and up and up and up. Right? You've got Howard Lutnick. They're openly decrying, openly criticizing the Treasury Secretary, openly criticizing Europe for pursuing green energy, clean energy, crazy. He and again defending Trump's plan to try and take Greenland, to buy Greenland. Scott Bessent talking about the same stuff. I mean, there's some crazy headlines in the geopolitical world coming out of this place. But for me, the reminder that these companies, which at this point, these technology brands like Meta and Salesforce and even, companies like Tata abroad are hosting these enormous parties to try and drive world opinion, drive world leaders in their opinions. And it's just as a reminder, these are companies that have the same resources as a nation state. They are, in essence, nation states unto themselves. And to my mind, the fact that they are drawing the crowds at a gathering like Davos is an incredibly important sign to watch in the ascendancy of these companies into the very upper echelons of power around the world.
The Rip Current is produced and created by me, Jacob Ward. And if you liked this show and you want more content like this, go to theripcurrent.com, where I publish a weekly newsletter that covers these same sorts of stories of the big invisible forces that have us all in their grip. And if you want to really do me a favor, if you could go to where you have listened to this or watched it and like it, share it, or even better, review it. Holy cow, is that helpful? It's the best possible way for me to find a new audience. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening.